Yo, what is going on, guys? It is the Interwebs Historian here, and put an Instagram poll on, my story, asking would you want a Battle of Trenton video, or a video debunking false memes, whether it be historical. Well, it's all going to be historical, but some might have some political reasoning behind the meme itself. And yeah, so I'm gonna try and make this video without a bias, because I don't really have one for any of the memes that I'm gonna be reviewing besides like one of them. And I think it's gonna be clear which one I actually have a bias against, but yeah. So this meme is basically referring to a JFK speech, which I will put here.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
So basically what Kennedy was talking about in this clip was his foreign policy, not his domestic, which is what the window on the right, or the AOC picture, is referring to. Kennedy escalated stuff in Vietnam, so he was most likely talking about sending troops to Vietnam in this quote. Kennedy was actually pro universal healthcare. There's a video of it, which is what the person making this meme was talking about when he put AOC as free stuff. That's basically what he was talking about. So yeah, I'll put that video of JFK rallying behind universal healthcare right here.
And what they do in England is entirely different. In England, the entire cost of medicine for people of all ages, all of it, doctors, the choice of doctors, hospitals, from the time you're born to the time you die, are included in a government program. But what we're talking about is entirely different. And I hope that while he's here, he and Dr. Spock and others who have joined us will come to see what we're trying to do. The fact of the matter is that what we are now talking about doing, most of the countries of Europe did years ago. The British did it 30 years ago. We are behind every country pretty nearly in Europe in this matter of medical care for our citizens. And then those who say that this should be left to private effort. In those hospitals in New Jersey where the doctors said they wouldn't treat anyone, who paid their hospital bills through Social Security, those hospitals and every other new hospital, the American people, all of us, contribute 1/2, 1 or 2/3 for every new hospital, the national government. We pay 55% of all the research done. We help young men become doctors. We are concerned with the progress of this country. And those who say that what we are now talking about spoils our great pioneer heritage should remember that the West was settled with two great actions by the national government. One, in President Lincoln's administration, when he gave a homestead to everyone who went west, and in 1862 he set aside government property to build our land-grant colleges. This cooperation between an alert and progressive citizenry and a progressive government is what has made this country great, and we shall continue as long as we have the opportunity to do so.
So these type of haha, France and Germany invaded Russia in winter, ha 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 ha, is probably the laziest mistake on a meme you could ever make. Unlike my previous meme, this whole concept of making fun of Napoleon and Hitler for invading Russia in the winter is just one Google search away from proving it wrong. Hitler invaded June 22nd, 1941, and Napoleon 2 days after, but in 1812, and June 24th, 1812. Germany's original plans were even a month prior in May, but they were postponed due to preoccupations at the time. Now, it is true that both of these armies saw the Russian winter, but to suggest that they, even began in winter, it undermines Hitler and Napoleon's competence, which Hitler didn't really have much of, but his military competence, I guess you could say, is willfully nescient. Okay, so this one basically saying, oh, Grant owned slaves Robert E. Lee didn't, North good or North bad, Confederacy good, blah 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 blah, which is really false. Lee owned slaves well even into the war itself, and while they may have been inherited, he worked them almost to death, I guess you could say, but they didn't die. And like even beated them for wanting freedom. He really almost caused a slave revolt for the horrible stuff he did to his slaves. And he has even said that slavery was bad for white people and really beneficial for African Americans. Lee really only freed his slaves after he was forced to, because in the will where he inherited these slaves, he was only allowed to have them for around 5 years, I believe. And there was one incident where when 2 slaves escaped, Lee ordered their beating and then their backs to be washed with brine. And during the invasion of Pennsylvania, Lee took black Union soldiers, brought them to the South where he enslaved them. So, and to address Grant's portion of the meme, he owned 1 slave. 1, and I'm like 95% sure that was inherited. And I would say that the person who only inherited 1 slave is 20,000 times better than the person who inherited multiple slaves, worked them to hell, beat them for wanting freedom, almost causing a slave revolt, saying it was good or bad for white people, enslaving soldiers, and washing slaves' backs with brine after ordering their beating. I would say Grant has the moral high ground in that situation. There are many reasons as to why this meme of Americans lost to quote-unquote rice farmers is false. And all of these memes that I've seen, and I'm pretty sure including this one, they talk about the Viet Cong, when main force Viet Cong was trained in guerrilla tactics, had well-developed political mobilization, had units in the South controlling villages as a source of manpower and supplies, had close-up ambush tactics used wisely so that the Americans couldn't call in close air support or artillery without taking out their own men as well, and not even to mention the multiple countries they faced before the U.S. even came into play, like France, Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, Thailand. Those might not be major powers besides France, but it's still a lot of training for a long time before we even went in there. So, yeah, and not to mention we were barely trained, if even ever trained, in the conditions of Vietnam, like the jungles and the monsoons and stuff like that. The Vietnam War was really between 2 professional armies. Only one employed tactics that would completely remove the advantages of the other. So no, we did not really lose to rice farmers, and anybody that tells you this is either A, joking, or B, pushing an anti-American agenda. Basically, at least. Alright, so this meme basically saying that the modern Democrats started the KKK is implying that the parties never switched, which is, well, BS. The Democratic Party today and the Democratic Party that started the Civil War and KKK are completely different except in name. The Klan came to be to intimidate African Americans after the Civil War, basically telling them to stay out of politics. And the change of parties probably happened around the 20th century with the rise of progressivism. The party that once stood for small government and intervention now supported people like FDR, who was very big government in his reforms and his concentration camp. I'm just kidding, it wasn't a concentration camp, I don't guess, but internment camps. That's a very, very huge government. Also the NFA, which basically taxed gun manufacturers and imports, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. So this whole modern Democrats started the Civil War in KKK and have always been anti-America, blah, 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 is completely dismissing facts. And that's just the basis of it. And if you go against that, you're going against almost all, if not all, historians to ever, have more than 3 brain cells, really. And that's not even to insult the people who don't think the party switch. I didn't even know what a party switch was until like a year or 2 ago. So it isn't to insult those people. I'm just telling those people that they need to research it. And if it's those people that actively deny the party switch, that is very much meant to insult them. This has been the Interwebs Historian. Goodbye.